Good afternoon. The Public Safety Committee will now come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Clark
Present.
Hubbard.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Present.
Alderwoman Sanye.
Present.
Alderman Aldred.
Present.
Chair Narayan.
Here.
Alderwoman Keys.
Here.
We have 7 present. We have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Quorum being present, I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, October 31st, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That was moved by Alderman from the 14th and seconded by Alderwoman from the 7th. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so just so that everyone understands kind of the run of show here, what we're going to be doing, the first thing we're going to take up is the Civilian Oversight Board nominee, and then we're going to hear from the Police Department on their use plans. We do have a hard 3:30, stop today, and then we're going to be coming back tomorrow. We'll continue this meeting until noon tomorrow and hear from the public on any or all of the resolutions put forward. So with that, we will jump to committee discussion item number 1, the Civilian Oversight Board, the mayoral appointment of Kristen Griffin. Is there anyone here to speak on that? Oh, please come forward, sir.
All right.
And are you Mr. Griffin?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Could you please raise your hand, and do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. If you could just tell us your name, roughly where you live, and your interest in the Civilian Oversight Board.
Yes, my name is Christian Griffin. I live by Southampton area over there on Chippewa, and I've been interested in the Civilian Oversight Board for a couple years now. I really became interested in it around high school because I want to be a lawyer, but I'm also interested in social justice overall.
Perfect. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Griffin? Please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Griffin, for being here. Just so the committee know, how old are you, Mr. Griffin?
I just turned 23 last month.
Thank you. One of the recommendations for the board is we have to have somebody who is of youth on the board. And as a young person, I still consider myself 30 being young. So we're in the same boat. But I just want to say thank you as a young person for stepping up and being willing to serve on, I think, a very important board. And whatever way this committee can be a help to you in the future, please let us know.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Please proceed, Alderwoman.
Thank you for your interest in serving. Echo the point. I think it's important that we have young folks. I'm 29, just a little bit younger than Rasheen, so I'm glad you're interested. I am curious about, I know you mentioned that you're interested because you maybe want to practice law and you're very interested in social justice. I think ideally it'll get to a point on the commission where you may have to hear some things that are quite traumatic. You might have to hear some things that are personal violation, and you also may have to hear some things where even though incidents happen, you may have to, based off protocols or priorities, say that, someone was not in the wrong. So I guess my question for you is, do you think that you're prepared to hear about incidents that may be traumatic and to objectively analyze, situations and make the best determinations?
Yes, ma'am. In college, I served on the judicial board at Southeast Missouri State University. So most of the cases we heard were controversial. And I feel that I am prepared based off that board that I served on and the decisions that we had and made. On that board, you couldn't be biased, even if your friends got in trouble. So,
thank you.
All right, and I'll just ask the same question that I've asked of all the nominees that have come forward in the past. Do you believe that you can set aside any biases that you have, either pro or anti-police, and look at each individual matter that comes before you in an unbiased fashion and make a determination on the proper path forward based on the evidence presented to you and nothing else?
Yes, sir. The former public safety director, who's my mentor, Judge Jimmy Edwards, when I used to talk to him, he always talked about the difference from when he was raised and how we were raised right now, and how it's a gap between police officers and our community as far as the relationship. So I have no bias against police officers or anything like that. My goal with this is, of course, to make decisions based off the facts and to also hopefully rebuild that community connection between the two.
Sounds great, and I wish you the best of luck on it. And at this point, I'll entertain a motion to pass Mr. Kristen Griffin to the full Board of Aldermen for further consideration on the Civilian Oversight Board.
So moved. Second.
All right?
Other one.
It's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Odenberg.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye.
Aye.
Alderman Aldred. Chair Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. We have 6 aye votes.
All right, with that, we will take up your nomination on Friday with the full Board of Aldermen. You don't need to be present there. Of course, you can if you'd like to, but I anticipate that you'll be hearing good news from us shortly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your service. All right, with that, we will move to the Police Department for their presentation on surveillance use technology.
Good afternoon, Chairman.
Good afternoon, Chief.
So we're here to present the surveillance use plan and also surveillance technology report. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce people that are here with us, and I'd also like permission, like we did last time with the surveillance technology report. We do have Dennis Mayers, a professor of criminal justice and director of the Center for Crime Science and Violence Prevention at the Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville. I actually said to him, if you put that on a business card, I'd love to see it. But he's going to be here. He's co-presenting with me. I also have Sergeant Marco Silva from the Intelligence Division, Sergeant Matthew Manley, Intelligence Division, Detective Chris Guatme from the Intelligence Division, Detective Will Hitchcock, Intelligence Division, Monet Cintron from my office, who has helped with the surveillance use plans, and also our Public Affairs Director, Mitch McCoy, who's here with us today. Should we have any questions that need to be answered, we can get to more specifics, so I don't have to get back to the chair. And as we go through this, we've actually, through Executive Order 78 and the ordinance that was passed earlier this year, and it's a description of technology. How does the tech work? Purpose of technology, authorized use of technology, deployment of our technology, the cost of the technology, discriminatory impact avoidance, and how we ensure in the policing is constitutional and avoiding bias, and data collection, what type of information is collected, and how it is deleted, and does it follow the Missouri records laws. And so those are the things that we talked about last time. The surveillance use plan, we have it here if we want to hand out to the Public Safety Committee. But it's been up for over 21 days right now. This is the size of it on each part of the technology that through the ordinance and the executive order that we're mandated and happy to do. And it's on our website, slmpd.org/policy. And when you go on it, you can see it's been up here for 21 days. Please read through this. It talks about all the technology I'm talking about today, answering all the questions, the purpose, authorized uses for all the technology that I'm going to quickly go through with a PowerPoint that people have seen here already. And so I went into greater detail I've gone out and I've done town halls on surveillance use technology into the neighborhoods. The last one I did was in Dutchtown. It was very well received with the information and the Q&A. And the more we can shed light on this without compromising investigations, the better the public is, the more informed public, the safer our community can be. And this is part of the negotiations and the ordinance to be able to do this. So if I can get started, I will move very quickly because people have seen this. I'll get to Dennis Mears, and I know you're going to have a lot of questions, and I have the team here to answer some of the specifics. So if we can go to the next slide. Sure. So I already spoke about Executive Order 78, which Mayor Jones issued Executive Order 78 in February of 2020, in February 23rd of 2024. It requires us, it mirrors almost what the ordinance has, and then we had an ordinance that follows this that's already codified in record. Ordinance requirements, I just spoke about the things, I went through the bullet points on the ordinance requirements, so I'll have us move when you get that up. So as we continue with ordinance requirements, data protection, how does the agency ensure that data is protected? Data retention, does it follow Missouri records retention schedule, and how long is it retained by the agency? Surveillance data sharing, do we share information and with other entities? Demands for access to surveillance data, how can other entities get access to the data? And training, how are we trained to handle it and who ensures compliance? Auditing and oversight, who ensures that surveillance use plans are followed or the department policies that govern the policy technology are followed? And complaints, how can citizens complain about the technology's use? So the general information on surveillance technology use plans. The usage of the department and technology is governed by department policies or federal policies. All of that is available online. All St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department personnel file Special Order 1-04 related to bias-based policing and racial profile, accessible on our website. The department provided general descriptions of how the technology works to ensure transparency. The department cannot share proprietary information related to its vendors. Moreover, the department seeks to provide an overview of how technology works rather than any one specific vendor works, given that vendors do change with the same type of technology. And once again, there are patents, there are MOUs that we sign, as other police departments do, not to, there's protected proprietary information that we got to be sensitive or we will lose it. The purpose of the surveillance use plans is to increase transparency and provide information on how SLMPD uses the technology to keep the residents and the visitors of St. Louis safe while still protecting everybody's individual civil liberties. There are guardrails in place. Prior to the executive order and prior to the ordinance, you heard me discuss that there are things in place that we have to go by, but now that we both have an executive order ordinance, it's actually, for the public, it's codified within city. And those are the type of things that we are happy to do, happy to be here today, and ensure the department does the best to meet all requirements of the ordinance and put our best foot forward. The department referred to several other cities, including Seattle, Washington, Boston, Massachusetts, to draft these use of plans that have gone through this type of exercise or informing the public and as transparent as possible after these other cities, which actually went through this a couple of years ago. So we kind of use that as things that have gotten through where the public has been satisfied in the things and the way they're doing it in these other cities, and we replicated a lot of things that they've done. Can we go are we able to go a couple pages? Can we get to the funding page? I'm not sure if we go through. There we go. So overall spending for surveillance technology amounted to approximately $4.84 million. This includes local, state, and federal dollars, as well as support from private foundations. Of the total funding, approximately 6%, $276,000 out of the $4.8 million was from private foundations. Very minimal, but it actually, every little bit helps. Overall spending on surveillance technology amounted to $4.8 million. This represents less than 1% of our total budget for the city of St. Louis and less than 3% of the overall police budget of $189 million for 2024. And then what we're talking about within these plans that's online in detail, the surveillance technologies, cameras, next slide, please. Cameras, body-worn cameras, in-car cameras, mugshot comparison, cyber crimes and crime analysis technology, GPS investigative technology, cell site simulator, license plate readers, and ShotSpotter, which is now known as sound thinking. So as the cameras, you can see that we have fixed cameras, mobile cameras, aerial cameras, and environmental investigation unit cameras. You see the pricing that's on there and how much the costs are and how much is grant funded. Cameras are continued. The cameras are governed by following department policies, Special Order 5-31 and Directive 2019-12-16. Body-worn cameras and in-car cameras, as you can see, the amount of funding that's there, and they're governed by department policy, Special Order 5-33. An RFP just went out recently to get 1,000 body-worn cameras. We currently have about 800 now, and the RFP is going out to other companies to see exactly if we can see if there's things that are better out there between all the have a competitive bid coming in to see where we stand, might be able to get upgraded, better cameras, storage fees, and repairs on those. And the battery shelf life in some of them, when they start going low, it compromises our police officers. Are they ready to go? Can they go out and patrol? Are they activating? We want to make sure we put the best product forward because we know building trust is to make sure that everything's viewed that can be on viewed from the officer or within our vehicles. Mugshot comparison. This technology is SMRT. It's similar to Google image search, and it's a database of criminal mugshots, and it returns a list of matches. This technology is available to regional justice information system subscription that the state uses, and it's about 1.8 million annually. This data is retained for no more than 10 days if the originating agency makes a notification and the record is no longer needed. This use of technology is governed by Department Policy Special Order 5-27. Cyber crimes and crime analysis technologies. We use this to conduct forensic examinations of electronic devices, including mobile devices, storage devices, computer, and more listed in the SUP. The Police Foundation gives us $210,000. Data is obtained after a search warrant has been issued. We have to get a court order to use these type of technology, unless exigent circumstances exist, as accessing a phone of a victim or a deadly crime or identify the origin of a school threat. Those are things I think you don't want us waiting on a judge. One of your family members is kidnapped. If we're able to go up on a phone, you certainly want us to do that. Those are exigent circumstances, and we have to be very careful when we use this. If we don't abide by these things in the court order, we can lose a case and set a person that's committed crimes free, because through the judicial process and the fairness of trials, that could be thrown out, and that's the last thing we want, is to have a person to get back out on the street. And certainly we don't want to have these technologies taken away. Therefore, we want to make sure we're using them in the proper fashion. Data is retained in accordance to the state retention schedule based on crime being investigated, and the use of technology is governed by a court-ordered search warrant. And if I could just expand on some of these things. If recently, every homicide, every person that's hurt by gunfire, everybody that is a victim of a crime is very, very important. But some things that we see get more media attention than others. And if you see something that happened in Midtown Manhattan, we had a healthcare CEO that was shot and he was assassinated on the streets of New York. If you really want to learn about this technology, there was no stone unturned in every paper of what the NYPD and the federal partners used to try to track down this individual that actually that was covered up and trailing using all this technology. I don't think that person will be in custody right now as quickly as it is without this type of technology to bring justice to this family and closure to this family and who shot their husband and or father. And that same technology, although it was highlighted and it made the media, it's the same type of technology that we use for every incident and major crime, violent incident happens to our citizens in the city of St. Louis. We make sure we can use them properly, and those are the things that we can do. Currently, right now, we are reducing homicides. Last year was a 10-year low. This year, we're actually lower than we were last year, and we have almost a 70% homicide clearance rate. That's with good detective work, trust in the community coming forward. but at the same time, that technology that I'm talking about today that we're leveraging is a reason that we're keeping the citizens of this city safe. Because we can prevent some of the crimes for a person going out and recommitting them, and then bring closure to some of the families, families of homicide victims. Cell site simulator, a system designed to identify mobile device by device's unique identifying number with a court approval search warrant unless exigent circumstances exist. Example, I already talked about a missing person, suspect, or a child after a case, etc. This funding was purchased in 2014 under the Urban Security Initiative Grant. The data is retained and deleted immediately after the use of technology. Use of the technology follows the policy guidelines developed by the Department of Justice, which can be found on their website, DOJ Cell Site Simulator Policy 9-3-15. License plate readers, we call them ALPRs or LPRs, is a computer-based system that takes digital images of license plates on vehicles during day or night and compares it to a list of stolen and wanted vehicles connected with felony crimes. The units are installed at traffic signals and throughout the city of St. Louis. The funding is approximately $17,000 Police Foundation funded, the city funded, and also city funded through the Board of Public Service. Data is retained for 90 days and automatically purged after that time. This use of technology is governed by Department Policy and Special Order 5-13, and then we see patterns and trends in people that are doing armed carjackings and/or burglary trends in the vehicles that they're using. This has been a great tool for us to make sure that we can know who's in the area and then make sure that we can arrest the individuals that are causing those issues and then at least get them off the streets and/or create a case to find out who's doing those type of things to bring that type of crime down. ShotSpotter. The software maker provided is also called SoundThing, formerly known as ShotSpotter. It uses acoustic sensors to detect gunshots and triangulate within 82 feet. That's actually broad. Most of the times I see it's a lot more precise than that, but they qualify it up to 82 feet. Where shots have been fired, the activations allow St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department officers to respond more quickly and accurately, potentially saving lives and preserving evidence. It has been time and time again in the last decade that I've been in police departments where I started as a pilot program in Chicago, had it in Wilmington, Delaware, and continue to have it and advocate for it in St. Louis, that we don't really advertise as much as we should, but there's a lot of times we're the ones rendering first aid, and there's a lot of lives waiting for an ambulance to respond. We're able to give first aid to that victim, and a lot of times saving their lives. And also collecting evidence so we can try to catch who's doing the shooting in our neighborhood to make sure we can keep our citizens safe. The funding for
Chief Tracy, I'm sorry, my apologies. Could you speak closer to the mic?
Sure.
Thank you.
The funding is $64K grant funded, $130K Police Foundation funded, and $242,000 funded by the Civil Asset Force. Current total coverage is only 6.26 square miles. The city of St. Louis is 66 square miles. Expansion project will increase coverage. We talked about this last time we were here. 1 mile in Dutchtown, Mount Pleasant neighborhoods, funded through grant funding that was several years ago that was decided on prior to me coming aboard, but I'm a proponent of where it's going to go, and I think it's going in the right place in this time and actually helping us in that area that is having more shots fired incidents in other parts of the city that don't have it right now. Sensor data is automatically purged every 30 hours. If an incident is created, short audio is stored permanently for evidentiary purposes only. ShotSpotter, can we go to the next slide? It triangulates the location and receives the location for activation. How many gunshots would... I know there's concerns that this is listening into the public. It is listening in the public space, but it's not listening to voices. It's not listening to conversations. It is actually where Dr. Dennis Mayers, who was not a fan of ShotSpotter or gun acoustic technology in the beginning, but he'll explain how he's changed his mind and when it can be leveraged in the right way. It is not listening to conversations. It is actually, they've gotten so sophisticated now. It's reading the sound waves or the type of gunshot, and that's what it's looking for. Nothing else. It's not forwarding to us, and it's only for that type of gunshot and ballistic sounds that it's hearing out there. It's gotten very, very good where it actually, where I've heard that it sends officers to locations where there's backfires, or there's a backfire, or there's some construction work.
Chief Tracy, every time you move away from the mic,
Backfire.
people at home can't hear you.
There you go.
So if you need to pick it up and take it off, you can. But I just want to make sure
I'm
everybody
ready
can
to
hear you.
sing. There we go. You don't want me singing a song. So where backfire and/or construction, it can differentiate from that. So we're not going to locations. I've heard police officers get sent to unnecessary locations. Now, it's fine-tuned through that. It goes through a filter process, and we're able to differentiate. So we're not going to scenes that we shouldn't be going to. And I don't know if we can do the audio now. Were we able to do the audio? Or are you going to come over? I'll give you the mic. So just as an example, a lot of people have heard this. Can we come back to the audio? Prior slide. So that's what we're hearing. That's what the only thing's going to be picked up on this. But it does triangulate into a location that could get us within a few feet, say something's in the back alley. And why it's really important, and the professor, Dr. Dennis Mayers, can elaborate more on this, but I do speak about this when I'm a proponent of ShotSpotter, that it also builds trust in the community, because we've done some white paper studies throughout the United States, and also it's actually mirrored right here in the city of St. Louis and other cities I've worked, is that almost 80% of the time, people get desensitized to shots fired. They think somebody else is going to call, and therefore nobody calls unless we have a victim. If they see a victim, then they call for an ambulance, or some people self-transport to the hospital. Then we don't know where it happens. We can't do the investigation. We can't get in the middle of it. We can't mitigate retaliation. We can't collect the evidence. And so those are the type of things that it's really invaluable. And when we're going out to 100% of the shots fired calls, because we know the exact location in the areas that we do have it, it really does build trust, that where in other places where no one's calling, people believe that the police don't care. But it's not that we don't care. Unless we can on-view it, hear it outside, or someone's calling us, then we're not responding, not because we don't care, it's because we don't know. Now we know 100% of the time, and we will respond. We'll do the canvas, we'll look for those shell casings, and then we'll get those shell casings in, even when when someone isn't shot. It's invaluable information when we can correlate it, because that person that's shooting a gun, it goes up exponentially, the chances that gun's going to be used again. And then we can correlate that between incidents. And we have solved murders by a person just shooting a gun a couple of weeks by getting evidence from that scene. And I have case-by-case basis, without compromising that case, that we have used that. It's invaluable, and the police officers know it, and it's helped close some cases where we didn't have good leads. So with that, with your permission, Chair, I'd like to just turn it over to Dr. Dennis Mayers. He will go through it quicker than he went through the first time, only because this will be the second time he's presenting as well. If that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Doctor?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Board.
Could you
state my name for the record?
Yeah, could you state your name for the record, and then do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do. Dennis Mesh.
All right, please proceed, sir.
All right, so
Could you repeat your name for the public?
Dennis Maris, M-A-R-E-S. We good?
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll talk a little bit about the surveillance technology in relation to policing, and sort of my own perspective as an academic on what I have learned over the years, and how I've come from seeing police technology as largely a negative to being a lot more hopeful about the potential, particularly about the potential to ensure that victimization and victims get aided rather than we're looking out for the offenders. Next slide, please. So I was, as I mentioned, very, very skeptical, particularly about ShotSpotter, for instance. My idea was always, look, police can't get there fast enough to make an actual arrest. And I think that is correct to some degree. Response speed is always going to be critical in that, and you're not always going to get there in time to make an arrest. But as I started talking to more and more police departments across the U.S., this is not just St. But I've talked to folks in Cincinnati and Winston-Salem, talking to folks in Tacoma now who are implementing a ShotSpotter system. So the key thing that police departments always tell me, it's not always necessarily about the immediacy of response, but it's about what can you do with it from an investigative point of view. And like the chief was mentioning, it's about the shell casings. It's about making the connections between. It's also about showing up and telling the community, we're going to come when you shoot guns, because you shouldn't be shooting guns. And I agree with that. I've listened to a lot of ShotSpotter recordings over the years, and one that still sort of rings in my head is one where 30 rounds were fired in rapid succession. And I don't think it was an actual shooting. It was just people shooting guns, as they tend to do sometimes. And all I could hear, and even though ShotSpotter itself is never activated by voices, what you can sometimes hear in the background is screams. And that's one of the ones that stood by me. It was the sound of a young child screaming about as loud as you could. After those, as those gunshots were ringing out, and I went into the data I had because, as a research partner for police departments, I have access to, the call for service data as well as some of the incident data. And I want to clarify that I only have access to information that doesn't contain PII. But moral of the story was that person who was screaming didn't trigger an actual call for service to the police department in this case. So had it not been for the ShotSpotter technology in that case, nobody would have shown up, nobody would have really looked at shell casings, nobody would have done anything for this particular individual. So in that sense, I do think that, surveillance technology has a lot of potentials. Now, that doesn't mean that we should always mindlessly apply these things, that we should just go ahead and put it everywhere and at all times and make us a surveillance state. And I don't think that's what we're doing in St. Louis. We're doing it judiciously, I think, and it's going to be data-driven. That's what it should be. So in the case of the expansion in Dutchtown, Mount Pleasant, we looked at the data. We looked at where are gun crimes the highest right now, and how can we ensure that those folks also get the best response out there when people are firing guns. The benefit of technology, too, extends into, and particularly with ShotSpotter, is not just about the showing up and the showing up quickly, it's also, can we then, when we get there, help folks? One of the things that myself and my colleagues have really never studied is, what is the benefit to gunshot victims of a system like ShotSpotter? Presumably, if you get there more certainly and hopefully more quickly, you can render aid to victims. I've heard a lot of stories from police departments that said, yeah, this is what we're doing, but nobody's really measured it. And it's partially because it's difficult to measure, don't get me wrong. But there are ways that we should be measuring that, and it's part of the research project I'll be doing here with the city. I think we have to be concerned about, where do we put this technology? Are we making sure that the way we do it isn't biased, that it doesn't lead to enlarging the inequities we have in our societies? So we need to be mindful of those consequences, and we need to study those outcomes as well. So we need to look at, if we're putting ShotSpotter in an area, does that lead to an increase in officer-involved shootings, for instance? So that's another thing I will look at. So we need to do it mindfully, but we do need to acknowledge, too, that those technologies can be life-saving in some cases, that they can make a difference in solving cases for police departments and bringing justice to victims as well. I think the notion that ShotSpotter is inaccurate is based on a wrong understanding of the data. I think it's based on a wrong take, and I think it's driven by ideological perspectives of folks. Um, What I do know is that ShotSpotter, and where I've been able to measure this, particularly in Winston-Salem, where we did the most recent work, is that in the majority of cases, there is some evidence when police respond to a ShotSpotter alert. In other words, the majority of ShotSpotter calls are certainly going to be legitimate calls. Now, that number is probably not quite as high as the company itself declares. I think ShotSpotter says, 97% accurate. I don't know it's quite that high, but it's not that far removed from it. And one of the things we'll be doing in St. Louis too is looking at the accuracy of the system. Next slide, please. So why is gunshot detection important? Not just for the city of St. Louis, but I think for all the cities struggling with gun violence, and there's many of us. As the chief mentioned, there is an incredible lack of insight from our citizenry in reporting these incidents. In most of the cities where we have studied what is the proportion of gunfire that's actually called in by the public, we find typically somewhere between 15 and 25%. That means that 75 to 85% of times that a gun is fired, nobody in the police department is called, nobody shows up. That sends a signal if police don't show up, right? It sends a signal of we can go ahead and do whatever we want to do because we're not going to be faced with consequences for our bad actions, because people shouldn't be shooting guns. I think we probably all should agree on that at least. Now, sorry, can you go back? Also, why is gunshot detection important? As I mentioned a little bit, is that it helps in the assisting of the active investigations. Again, this is not as well researched as it should be, but how, for instance, are cases impacted when ShotSpotter is involved? Does it mean that cases have a higher likelihood of arrest? Do they have a higher likelihood of a conviction? And that is something we need to know about more as well. And as I mentioned, aiding gunshot victims. I think from a moral perspective, that is what we should be doing in public safety. It doesn't matter who gets shot, whether it's an innocent victim, an innocent bystander, or a person who's involved in crimes themselves. Our role as public safety people is to make sure that they get all the aid so that we can make sure that they survive. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, this is a little bit of work I did in St. Louis. The level of underreporting in St. Louis tracks very closely to what we see nationwide. So for instance, 86% of the ShotSpotter incidents we looked at had no matching call for service from anybody in the community. And that's a staggering number, frankly. And that number tends to be higher in some pockets of the city than others, but on the whole, this number is fairly close to this. Next slide, please. So what are the things that make, people not report? Is it ill will? Is it that people don't like the police, for instance? Well, it could certainly play a role, but I think what my work has found is that it has mostly to do with the fact that people don't always hear it. And this typically tends to happen far more in the winter months or in the hottest part of the summer when people have their heating and cooling systems on. Because gunfire happens at night, and that's the time when all those machines are always running around, and you don't hear anything coming from your outside. There's also some issues with reporting near vacant properties in the city. As you guys know, we have quite a few vacant properties still in the city. And that means that, again, there's nobody around to hear it and report it. So we have a lot of, if you want to call it that, blind spots in the city in which reporting of criminal incidents is frankly not optimal. And technology can provide some role in that and making sure that we get the most out of it. Next slide, please. So sort of to reiterate what I said, and I'll go quickly here because I know I'm taking up a lot of time. But why is responding to all gunfire important? I think the first thing should be that we want to make sure that we assist victims. Firing guns is not kids' play. It is dangerous. It shouldn't be happening. And yet it does happen, and we want to make sure that we can deter it as much as possible and put a stop to it as much as we can. You want to show the community that you care about their well-being and that you take gun violence serious, and that offenders have to face some degree of consequences for engaging in illicit behavior like this. I think too, and as the chief has very well pointed out, is that it's a very important investigation, and by going to every single incident, collecting cases, you're then able to link the shell casings to all types of different crimes. There's a small number of guns that keep showing up in crimes. And this is the same in St. Louis as it is in all kinds of other cities. This is nothing unique to us. And we want to make sure that we do all the analytical stuff that we can with the information that we can get from the street. And this is one way to do it. And one of the things that the recent research has shown is that ShotSpotter, or gunshot detection more broadly, does lead to an increase in evidence collection. And that, I think, is a really critical thing that a lot of folks really need to understand. Next slide, please. I will kind of glance over this for now because we talked about this last time. Next slide. I did that one too. I think I'm starting to get repetitive here. Next slide, please. So here's a great example of what I think that a system like ShotSpotter, particularly if you use good analytics with it, can do for you. This is one location. This happens to be a vacant home in the city of St. Louis. I blacked out the street name, so you can't tell where it is. But this is a problem property. This is several months of ShotSpotter alerts in the same location, and it's the same place over and over and over and over. And this is where you collect the evidence. This is where you go out, and this is where you do extra hotspot patrols to deter what I would guess is probably juveniles shooting guns for fun in a vacant building. This shouldn't be happening because the people who live across, because the house across from it still looks pretty decent. It's got a roof on it. It's probably occupied. There's probably some other houses nearby. Think to yourself, would you like to live next to a property where you have this many gunfire incidents? It's not a pretty thing to have to live next to. Next slide, please. So to get to the heart of the grant project that is leading up to the expansion of ShotSpotter system in the Mount Pleasant, Dutchtown area. So we were awarded, the St. Louis Police Department was awarded the grant in 2021. I was the research partner for the grant because it's a smart policing grant, and smart policing grants have to have a research partner attached to it. This is, for the record, too, my second smart policing grant with the police department. We did one prior on mobile surveillance trailers, and I'm happy to speak to that as well if you have questions about that. So initially, the grant was intended to, under a different administration than the current chief, was intended to enhance the response, the direct response to gunfire. But as you guys know, police personnel is down. The grant was going to be very difficult to execute in the current climate. And so ultimately, in consultation with the Department of Justice, it was decided that we're going to have to do something different. And that ended up being the expansion of the ShotSpotter zone in South City. And in particular, what we wanted to do to make it a little bit more innovative is link license plate readers and ShotSpotter detection, or ShotSpotter gunshot detection, together in one project, so that we don't only hear the gunfire, but then we can also see who has come and gone from the places where a victim was found, for instance. This, we would imagine, or at least hope for, will give police a lot more detail on the investigations, which should hopefully lead to more arrests and more convictions when these cases go to court. Next slide, please. So as part of the project, it is my responsibility to evaluate the outcome of, the investments in technology. And so we're going to look at the impact on gun violence in the Dutchtown, Mount Pleasant area where the area was impacted. But we're also going to take a look at the investigative outcomes. This requires a little bit more detailed dive in the case files for any incidents in which somebody was shot in that community. We'll have to see what is the outcome on the immediate outcomes. Is there an arrest? We'll have to look and see, and it's a little bit dependent on how much time we have in this project. What is the outcome when these cases go to court? And so another thing, as I kind of mentioned, my concern about gunshot victims and police showing up quickly is that when we get there quickly, we can help save lives. And there's a couple of studies that have shown that in ShotSpotter locations, there's a reduced time to an emergency care facility for a gunshot victim. So I wanted to explore as well, if there are folks getting shot in this community, does that have a good impact on their health outcomes, yes or no? So hopefully we'll be able to get a more definitive answer on those three major questions we have about the efficacy of the system. My goal in this project is to make sure that this is a data-driven project, that there are measurable outcomes, and that those outcomes are communicated in a public way. The final report for this project will ultimately be released by Department of Justice and will become part of the public record. That doesn't mean that I can't probably speak freely about the results as well as they roll in, but this is just to say that these kind of projects are committed not just to being data-driven, to have a research partner on hand, but also to the transparency of the outcomes. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I think, yes, we need to be mindful of surveillance technology more broadly. We want to make sure that when we do it, we get it right, that we do it for the right reason, and that we are data-driven in these things. And I think this police department has done an outstanding job in all those fronts. Honestly, when I work with police departments, it can sometimes be very difficult as an academic, to work with the police department. I've never experienced that with the St. Louis Police Department, not under this chief, not under prior chiefs. This has been a history, I think, of this police department, is to openly work with academics and seek their input wherever they need it. And I think that's something that the department should take some degree of pride in. Not that they're working with me. That's probably not the best person in the world, but they have had a history of working with really great academics, folks that have trained me. And I think that speaks to their commitment to making sure that what they do is evidence-based, data-driven, and that it's looking at outcomes. And I think that's what we need from a police department, whether it doesn't matter if it's a small police department or a big police department, but data-driven is what we are after here, I think, as an academic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to open it up to the committee if they have any questions specifically regarding ShotSpotter, because I know that you, the resident expert here on that. So do any committee members have any questions regarding ShotSpotter, that technology specifically? Alderman, please proceed.
Will you be here later on today or tomorrow when we actually discuss the actual use plan for ShotSpotter?
What time today are we talking about? I can stay here for as long as I need to.
Well, we only have until 3:20 today, so my apologies to the folks in the crowd who are waiting to talk about the actual use plan. But even since I imagine we won't get to it today, I just think it might be helpful if you were able to come back when we discuss the actual use plan connected to ShotSpotter.
At the same time tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
It'll be noon tomorrow.
Oh, it'll be noon?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make every effort I can to be here.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any questions from anyone else? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And Chief, just since we do have kind of a short time left, the, out of all the various use plans, the ones that seem to have the most public discussion regarding them were ShotSpotter and then the cell site simulators. I was hoping that you or your team may be able to get into some of the nitty gritty on the cell site simulators with the remainder of the time that we have left here today.
So if everybody takes a look at the surveillance use plan, and if we want to go to cell site simulators, I want to make sure that the people that are using it actually use it in the field, can take you through any questions you might have. And I'm going to hand this over. Marco Silva, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, Board of Aldermen.
Good afternoon.
I'm Sergeant Marco Silva, St. Louis Police Department.
So can you tell us just a little bit about cell site simulators, how you guys use them, the underlying technology there, and when and how you choose to utilize it, when there may be exigent circumstances where you use it? And I understand from my discussions with the chief, the vast majority of the time they're used pursuant to a valid warrant, but there are those exigent circumstances where it's kind of an emergency use. Could you just get into that a bit?
Sure. It's so it's a device used to locate the mobile devices, and it only gathers the actual numbers, doesn't gather any content, doesn't like read text messages, anything of that sort. And it is a police tool, and like you say, it's used in conjunction with the search warrant. And on the search warrant, you have to establish the probable cause for the technology to be used, to be deployed. And unless it's exigent circumstances where a significant delay on getting that search warrant could result in a loss of life, for the citizen, for the victim, and only in those specific circumstances that the search warrant exigent circumstances that wouldn't be sought.
So the only data that you're getting from the cell site simulator is whether an actual cell phone is present, not any of the information contained on that cell phone. You're not getting the text
Correct.
messages or the
No.
pictures.
No, sir.
Not listening into a conversation.
No, sir.
Okay.
It's only the mobile identifiers.
Okay. So you just know if someone is within a certain proximity of a specific location.
I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
You just know if someone is within a certain proximity of any given location where you deploy this.
If that number, if that
Okay.
specific number, not
Sure. Yeah. I guess
person,
not the person.
yeah,
but
just that number.
Yeah. The
Yes.
phone number. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And are these? I know that the concern that I've heard kind of over and over is that these are used at or around protests,
Okay.
and that they're used to identify protesters, B, to chill First Amendment freedom of expression.
Okay.
Basically. Is that something that SLMPD has utilized
No,
at
sir.
or around protests?
No, sir. No. It's it's only used in part of a pursuit of a criminal investigation.
Okay.
So
Do you have any just anecdotal stories about where something like this has been utilized? Because when I think of it, I think of the connection to the concerns, real or perceived, that they're used to quash protest.
okay.
Actually, can you give just an anecdotal story even about where the technology was utilized in a way that we may not think about?
No, yeah, like there's no way to utilize this type of technology without you have to have the mobile identifiers, and it just couldn't really be done. So yes, sir.
without compromising any investigation. There's a wanted fugitive, there's somebody that might be dangerous to the community. If we're able to identify where they might have the cell, it might be on that person, or not in that area. Sometimes we don't have to go to different places and get ourselves in a situation that's unnecessary if we're very secure in who has that cell phone. So we can identify who's in the area, but it's only used in criminal investigations. It's not used at protests. It's not used to surveil our citizens and their First Amendment rights for free speech or protest. These things are used in serious crimes. These things are used in narcotics trades. These things are used into the identifier of what we're doing. I don't want to get into too many specifics because sometimes it'll give away patterns and practices of what we try to do to bring people to justice. But overall, you need a search warrant. You need a court order. You have to present this before a judge before we can move forward on this technology.
Thank you, Chief.
Understood. Thank you, Chief. With that, I'll open it up to any members of the committee. I know that even internally, we've had discussions regarding this technology, and it's kind of a hot topic. So certainly, if anyone has any questions, now would be a great time. Alderman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. One thing I noticed when I looked on the website with cell site simulator being a use technology, I know it's not on the police department policy and website. Is there a reason the other technologies are listed and this one isn't?
I would have to get back to you on that, Alderman. I believe that we have a redacted version. I believe so.
Hi, Monique Centron. So the policies that for the cell site simulator, it's regulated by the DOJ. DOJ has that policy on their website. I also included in those packets. So that entire policy is in there.
Okay, and it's always good to see Miss Monet down here at the board because I know she does so much. Just Miss Monet. So just because so I'm clear, just because it's on the DOJ website, what was the reason of not putting it on the?
It wasn't on our website just because it's not our policy, but I just referenced it.
But this is a policy the department uses, or is one of the use plans and policy?
Yes.
Within your packet?
Yes, but I'm trying to understand why it's not online, and the other ones, body cam, mugshot, mobile surveillance, like all these other ones, Shot Spotter, are online, but I guess my belief was that all these use plans ones would be online because they are one of the individual uses that the department use.
So normally, the policies that are written by the department will be on the department website. Because it's not one of ours, it's not on our website, but if you would like us to put it on, I think we reference it in.
Okay. And so I heard the chief, or maybe the detective, I don't want to get your title wrong, Sergeant, mentioned mainly these are used at for criminal investigations. Going back to the protests, sometimes there have been criminal investigations that have happened at protests. So have those been used to try to have those been used at protests when there have been criminal investigations from the department? Most of it was probably before your time, Chief Tracy, when we had an uprising and protest, but.
They have been used since my time here. It's not something we do use unless there's going to be a violent crime and we have to identify, say someone shoots somebody at a protest. I think to try to identify who that individual, it might be something we use in an investigation, but depending how the investigation goes, we don't use it for the sake of using it. We kind of use it to help us in an investigation for additional leads. But if something's happened at a protest, that's usually in plain sight. There are other investigative tools that we would use if there's a violent crime, and it has not been used, and to my knowledge, it has not been used. We do not use these at protests, and if a crime's committed at a protest, that's correct.
That's correct, Chief. That's correct, Chief.
Thank you. And also good to see you, Chief, by the way.
Thank you, Alderman.
Part of the surveillance, maybe a mayor's administration question. So I'm curious. I know there's been conversations back and forth of why red light cameras was not part of this technology when I think it was clear when we moved the board bill, this one that I passed, we was doing that in a collaboration with the red light camera technology, which does mention other departments, which I know will be administered from the streets, but will be working in hand with the police department.
Sure. For the record, Casey Milberg, Policy Director in the Mayor's Office. And as the Alderman alluded to, there has been a lot of conversation over the past month about this. And after conferring with the City Councilor and sorting through this, the reason is the timeline. And so the next step in the timeline is what will trigger the production of that use plan under the ordinance. So the RFP selection committee that is currently convened under BPS per the ordinance approved the issuance of the RFP for automated cameras on June 28th, 2024. Board Bill 185 became effective on July 1st, 2024. So that first phase was already underway. The guidance from the City Councilor's office is that the next phase of this that triggers that production of the use plan for the ordinance is the entering into an agreement with portion of Board Bill 185. That's found in Section 2, subsection 4 of the legislation. In the interim, the full picture of what you can expect to see of how these cameras cannot be used is currently in Ordinance 71821, which is Board Bill 105, the Automated Camera Enforcement Act, and that's specified in detail the exact requirements that this will have to be in compliance with. So once a vendor is selected, again, that will trigger that portion of the ordinance, and a use plan will be prepared that incorporates the information and the requirements of Ordinance 71821. Where the department is at in that process is it's received bids. There's a vendor it believes fit the requirement. The next step in the department's process is to convene another selection committee meeting that includes ITSA as well as the police department to run through and make sure that everything is satisfied in terms of needs, the ordinance needs, having all the information that the vendor meets the requirements. Once that's been confirmed, the vendor will be deemed as selected, and at that point, that use plan in compliance with the ordinance will be produced.
Thank you for that answer. I just want to make sure that was on record. I'll save a lot of my questions tomorrow because I know we were hoping to hear more of the use plans. I know we went really in depth in Shot Spotter. It almost was like I was being sold a program that actually hearing about the use of Shot Spotters. I wish for all the technologies we go that in depth about all these use plans. And to the chairman, since it's on record, the meeting tomorrow is at 2, not 12.
We're going to be continuing the meeting. We're not going to gavel out this meeting. We're going to be continuing this meeting to noon tomorrow to ensure that we have adequate time to hear from everyone.
Good to know because the website.
There is a public safety meeting for 2 p.m. tomorrow.
Okay. I don't.
I'm sorry, Mr. Narayan. I have Clerk Kennedy on the phone. He's going to send you an email.
Okay.
But based on what he's communicating with me, you would have had to have even a 24-hour notice to do that as well. Because
To continue a meeting?
Per
We can't
Sir.
recess?
Per sunshine law,
yes,
it was not noticed up.
Okay. Okay. Well, then we'll be back at 2.
thank you.
All my questions at the moment.
Do you have any questions, Alderwoman? All right. Please proceed.
I have a lot of questions. First of all, thank you, Chief Tracy. Thank you for coming before us. But, I'm just going to be really honest first. I just feel like today's use of time was not the wisest. I have constituents who could be at work and who could be doing other things that came and sat and they thought that they were going to use plans discussed. And I have constituents who are taking breaks at work so that they can watch, and they were under the impression that we were going to discuss the use plans, especially because it's the exact same presentation that we already received, that has been recorded, that people can access online. I just think when we're talking about building relationships with the public and building trust, a large way that we can do that is feel like we're actually honoring and speaking to what they're expecting to. Again, it's my job. I'm happy to be here and hear everything you have to say, but members of the public and community members don't have the same time that we have. So I think it's really important that we meet their expectations and discuss what we want to discuss and are clear on what we want to do. So today, great, I guess, proposal or advocacy for ShotSpotter, but that wasn't our purpose for today. Our purpose was for use plans. So I wanted to just say that first and apologize to constituents because I also told them about the meeting, not knowing, like, I didn't know what it would be. So I see some of them are like, "What is this?" And I'm sorry to you all. I didn't know. I have a lot of questions about the cell site, and I'll just keep it to that since that is what we did get to today. My first question is, are cell site simulators, are they intended to be limited to exigent circumstances only? Because I noticed that within the plan, only exigent and emergency situations are referenced, or are those the only situations in which we use this technology?
No, we use them during a court order, during investigations if needed. So exigent circumstances those are above and beyond a court order. So we're trying to say it's protecting people's civil liberties and rights. And in a criminal investigation, we need a court order by a judge signed off that this tool is necessary. Exigent circumstances or something that if we have to wait for that, there could be serious physical injury or loss of life of an individual, just say a kidnapping. And should we have information that a person that might be traveling, that we might be able to get information that we can intervene and possibly save somebody's life, that's exigent circumstances. And that's actually in a lot of different things. But we have to be able to prove that, show that, and make sure that, and it's rarely used. Everything else is through a court order.
And so does that information maybe belong under deployment information so that when people see the plan, they can know, like, hey, these are the circumstances we usually use it in, and then these are the specifics of when we, actually deploy it outside of that?
Right, well, I thought that was pretty, I know going through this, the PowerPoint one more time, but there's some people that haven't heard this. I thought the PowerPoint was really important because the PowerPoint actually went through how we use this. The surveillance plan gets into very detail and minutia, but going through that, I did explain things in the PowerPoint, and I thought telling the story through a PowerPoint, how this is used, is a surveillance use plan. Getting into this with specific questions, those questions that exigent circumstances, I gave examples during a quick presentation. I did not go into detail. I did not go as long as I did last time, but I thought it was important for the public to see it that might not have seen it. And that's why I led off with the PowerPoint and then any specific questions. This has been online for 21 days. We put it out to the public. Most of the things that are in here go into our policy behind the use of surveillance plans. Exigent circumstances I explained in the PowerPoint. And yes, and it also explains that a court order is needed to use technology unless we have exigent circumstances.
Respectfully, I'll just disagree with you, and that's fine. We don't have to agree. Like I said, we only have 90 minutes today, and people took their time out to come because there's a hearing. So they've been sitting and waiting for us to get to what they want, and I don't think that the presentation, not saying there's a problem with the presentation, but I don't think it got to what they're looking for, but that's okay. We can agree to disagree. I just want to put my opinion on the record while we're discussing it. Can you tell us a little bit about how the data is reviewed and analyzed, specifically after a collection pursuant to the warrant?
Sure, Alderman. So as the information comes in into the cell site simulator, it just looks for a match. If it is the device we're looking for, we get the alert, and if it's not, it gets purged. It doesn't store anything. It's a continuous search. It's just a log of info that just immediately gets deleted.
Okay. Just writing down your thoughts. I also see it looks like there's So maybe this is not missing and I'm just not seeing it, but is there information in here on how the data is deemed relevant or not, or deleted inadvertently, like data you might have collected on accident or data you weren't looking for when you were doing the sales type simulator, and how that data is preserved or handled?
No, so the data that we're looking for is just a digit. It's called the IMEI, which is listed here. It's just a big digit number. That's what you put on the device. And that's all the device looks for. Like, it doesn't really gather any content or messages or anything. All he's looking for is for that particular device. And once he finds it, he gives us the alert. Like, there's no other data that is captured. And, it looks for, the devices. If it's not a match, it is immediately purged.
Okay. On page 3, and our pages may be different, so I'm referencing, but I'm looking at my plan online. Yours is printed, might be different. It references a grant of $1 million that was received in 2014 to purchase the technology, but I don't see a mention of like the actual cost of the technology. Do you know what the actual cost is, or the annual annual operating expenses?
So it was a one-time grant, woman, and I can probably have to get back with you on the cost. And I just noticed it wasn't listed here, but there's no. It was a one-time purchase. There's no like recurring fees, not like subscription based system.
So even when you all did the expansion within the Dutchtown neighborhood and the other places, it didn't require any additional. You didn't need to acquire any additional software for that.
Yeah, a cell site simulator is not part of ShotSpotter. So that's a ShotSpotter technology, different technology. This actually is mobile to be able to use, where it's able to detect where a cell phone is. And it was a one-time urban area security initiative, what I explained in the PowerPoint grant for $1 million.
All right.
I apologize.
I'm sorry, in 2014, it was a one-time $1 million grant.
Okay. I think it's almost time for us to end, so I will hold my questions there.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Yeah, we have to clear the room for public infrastructure. Oh, Alderwoman Velasquez, do you have a quick question?
I do. I just want to point out, and not to be totally contrary, Sergeant, I know that I think one of the things with the cell site simulator is a concern just in the general, I think, mode, at least for me, of St. Louisans, is that there has been a history with, I think, stingrays and cell site simulators are the same technology. Someone correct me if I'm wrong in that. They're similar technologies, and I wasn't in this role, maybe you weren't in this role, but there were court cases where police were illegally using them. So I think that that's an important fact to put on the record. We're not saying that you're doing that now, and we didn't have surveillance use plans now, but I think that in my mind, it's an important reason why we should be thorough in our discussion of all of these technologies, because there has been, we have had actual documented moments of abuse of it in the past. So that's all I wanted to say. I know that we'll have more robust discussion tomorrow.
Thank you, Alderwoman. With that, we'll wrap up for the day. All members were present at some point here, and we're going to acknowledge all testimony and oral testimony tomorrow. So with that, we will stand adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you.